Welcome to Aging Gayfully. We're about adventure, leisure, travel, being a citizen of the world, traveling to destinations, and being a part of the global community as we age and prosper in body, mind, and spirit.
Welcome to Aging Gayfully. I'm Josh.
Oh, is that my cue?
It is your cue as you are.
I was about to drink my water.
You're necking down that beverage from that Gators cup, by the way.
The only reason I have that is because it was $1. It was a special. It was a special. I'm not a Gator. I'm not a Seminole. I'm just an old gay guy aging gayfully. But if it was a St. Louis Blues cup, then I'd be like, I'd be a fanatic.
Football season has begun.
Wait a minute. The St. Louis Blues are not a football team.
I know, but
is there a sport football? What?
There's two sports football.
Really? Yeah, the one where you kick it and the one where you throw it.
That's right.
It's confusing.
It is football season, and I will tell you.
Are you a football fan? I never knew if you're.
Very much. Very
really?
much.
Who's your favorite team?
Well, I grew up in Miami, and so all teams Miami are my favorite team. And also, I've got
I kind of like the Dolphins. Yeah.
Yeah, but I've got this this love-hate relationship with my teams. I love them, and they treat me like they hate me. It is football season now. My Hurricanes have done well. They are 2-0 now. My wife Amanda, she is a Gator fan because she works for them, and the football Gators, not so great.
They used to be pretty good, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they've won national championships.
Yeah,
but not so much anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I get because there's a lot of, like in Florida, I mean, you've got the Seminoles, you got the Gators, and you got the Hurricanes. So there's a lot of competition. But then, Florida Atlantic University is, the Owls. They're kind of in my neighborhood. They're stepping up too. But this isn't a sports podcast, but we can make it into one.
This podcast is about whatever the hell we want it to be about.
Let's sports does help us age gayfully. It builds community. It does. But I'm a fan. My favorite sport is hockey.
Oh, very good. So you're gonna have to educate me. Although I have been to a hockey game because the Florida Panthers.
Yeah,
I've been to a couple Panthers games, and Panthers hockey. That the time that I went and saw a couple games, they were pretty good. They went to the Stanley Cup Finals.
They did. They won the Stanley Cup this year.
Yeah, I didn't go to any of those. This was many moons ago.
When you had hair on your head and on your beard as well. Because now it's the clean shaven Josh Wilson. Because we covered that last week in a very explicit podcast, I might say.
It was explicit. I have not been paying attention. Have we done anything so far to merit the explicit tag? I don't think so.
Well, we got 25 more minutes to kind of make that happen. So,
well, we'll see if we can do it with today's topic. Today's topic is Grandparents' Day today. Today being Sunday, September 8th.
Yeah.
And Grandparents' Day, every year they have a theme, and I love this year's theme. I don't know who sets the theme, just I guess a panel of grandparents or something. But this year's theme is Great Minds, Learn, Love, Legacy. Great Minds, Learn, Love, Legacy. And I think that this topic, is ripe for discussion on Aging Gayfully. And I want you to tell me a little bit about your experience with your peers, because you're not a grandparent, but your experience with your peers who are grandparents and also happen to be gay.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm not, as you mentioned, I'm not a grandparent, but I am happy to say that today I am a great FU favorite uncle.
Very good. You mean it happened today?
My great niece had a baby yesterday in New Orleans.
Oh, that's nice.
So I have to I'm going to call my niece later on today and say, "You're a grandmother at 51?" And it's kinda melancholy 'cause, my sister Jerry passed
Mm,
away 3 years ago in New Orleans, and I can just envision her today. She'd be, like, dancing, singing,
mhm.
and being the mommy maw as her nickname was for her grandchildren, mommy maw, and I think that's a kind of a place to start. And I think most grandparents, parents, they come up with nicknames. My sister, all 4 of my sisters had a nickname with their grandchildren. My sister Joanne, her grandkids called her Joey. My sister Sissy, her grandkids call her. She's still alive. I better be careful. Uh, call her Nana Mac because our last name is McClellan. And then Sister Mary, she's known as Mio. And then Jerry was named Mommy Ma, and that's more Southern because she was in New Orleans. And then my grandmother on my mother's side, I only knew my grandmother. The only grandparents I knew on my family were my mother's mother, and she was called Mother Dear.
Oh, mother dearest, that feels a little something.
Well, it was to me because she and I just didn't see eye to eye. But the most memorable thing my grandmother said to me, I was probably 7 or 8 years old when she said, "I carried all my daughter's children out of the hospital, but I didn't carry you out because I hated you."
What the fuck? Okay, there's our explicit
There's our
tag.
explicit. I knew I would get it out of you today.
But what is that all about?
Well, it's all about past history and drama and things that are out of the person's control that's receiving such a comment,
Mhm.
that you tend to think that it was your fault. And my mom was standing right there when she said it. And it's like, oh my God. But, at 7 or 8, you don't understand the relationship between your parent and their parents. Now, my siblings would tell you a whole different story about Mother Dear, how wonderful she was. And I could talk glowingly about my er, my grandmother's siblings. I can't talk glowingly about my grandmother. I I didn't know my grandparents in Canada. They were my grandfather was gone, and the time I visited Canada as a kid, who would remember? I wouldn't remember. But grandparents are that I've heard this said many times over the years, and it's kind of in jest. But if I'd have known grandchildren were so much fun, I would have had them first. And I'm sure you've probably heard that a few times in your work in senior care.
Mhm. Yep. Yep, definitely.
But in my experience as working in social service, especially in the LGBT community, one of the most wonderful, heartfelt, and difficult experiences and groups that I became involved in uh, was the gay grandparent group. This group formed out of a suggestion from the community, and uh, I ended up being, the staff person involved.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
don't know why, because I didn't have any, I didn't have any kids. But I will say, in my career as a social worker, and I don't know if content creator is a career. I guess for some people it is, but I had never been involved with a group of people like the gay grandparents group that bonded. like they did. There's nothing that bonds people together than sharing stories about their kids. And I bet 100% you relate to that one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love to hear it every single time. The perspective of gay grandma, what time, when was this? What year?
Let's see. I was on staff at SunServe in 2000. It'd be between 2012 and 2014. And I don't know if the group is still going on,
Hmm.
but I do know the impact that the group had on its members.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I'd like to hear that because, that as we get further and further along and as we have the, the passover to the next generation, and as things are more and more accepted and normalized, the concept of gay grandparents, or I have two grandmas on the same side
there's
or something, a lot
th-
more normalized now. But as we look back and go back the decades, a gay grandparent, especially one who was openly gay, I think was must have been few and far between as far as people being aware that they existed, or as far
you
as
mean
them saying,
there's gay seniors?
yeah, well, let's
Oh
hope
my
for the sake of
God.
this podcast, let's hope that there are.
So a couple of things here, Josh, and I won't certainly won't give away any of the names of the
Of
folks
course.
that were involved. That would be imprudent. But uh, it's important to kind of put this in context. And the first part of this conversation is uh, in the LGBT community, or LGBTQ plus W. I don't know. I mean, I'm from the I'm from the 70s and 80s. LGBT is kind of what I identify with. I know that there's a lot more to the alphabet, but I'm not going to kind of get into that. But what's common across the board is that the gay men and the lesbian women often don't intermingle well, uh, especially in groups. Uh, that's not to say that the individual gays and lesbians intermingle well, because I have a lot of wonderful lesbian friends, but in a group setting, it also often takes me back to parochial school. We're in a group setting, and the men are all sitting on one side at one table, and the lesbian women are all sitting on another side. They're all by themselves, and you try to intermingle, but sometimes it's awkward. That's kind of how
Like the
that
middle school dance is what you're
like the
saying.
middle school dance, right? Like, are they going to talk to me? I don't, what am I going to say? It's like, so, that's kind of prevalent. But I will say, when the LGBT gay grandparents group started, I had never seen people bond together. I'd never seen gay men and lesbian women bond together over their stories as being parents and grandparents and great grandparents. And 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 that's kind of why I started out with my story about my grandmother,
Mhm.
because not all the stories are happy. There's and being able to, for those grandparents, being able to share the joys and the sorrows with their experience with their adult kids and with their grandkids was cathartic for them, because it was another realization that they were not alone. And I think one of the biggest issues as we age, no matter what side of the orientation fence that you're on, is isolation. And I can't think of anything worse than being isolated because of who you are by your kids. That story was prevalent throughout the gay grandparent group, as was the story of acceptance, love, care. I'm so glad that you came out. All that, is this intermingle of beliefs and society where some of the adult children accepted their parents being gay, some of them didn't, and some of that transitioned into you'll never see my grandkids. You'll never see your grandkids. That I'm holding that against you, and all the let's face it, we all have family baggage. We've both talked about our family baggage on our podcast, and it's good to be able to do that. But when you get a little bit older and life kind of changes for you health wise, you wonder, am I the only one experiencing this? And for this group of it was 15, 20 people coming together. Some of them came with their uh, current spouses, whether they're same-sex spouses. Some of them didn't. Some of those relationships, those current relationships, are impacted because of the adult children, how the adult children react to the new relationship. It's kind of across the board. And when straight people break up and then they marry another spouse or the opposite, it's very common to have that dichotomy of emotions and experiences. But I come back to what a wonderful experience that was for me to watch people who normally would not communicate to one another share their experience as grandparents. It was kind of like after the first meeting to get going, then what are they doing? I bring in the pictures,
Yep, yep, yep.
uh, sharing the you know, sh- sharing the story of the coming out, how difficult that was, sharing the hurt of the other spouse, the living that closeted life as a and there's wonderful stories where the there's still they're still friends with the parental spouse. And look, so those are all these stories out there that often don't get talked about in mainstream media that are healthy, wealthy, and wise. And that's kind of why we have these conversations, I think, just as in a friendly manner.
I'm wondering if I'm not asking you to put a percentage on it, but were there more stories of the family being accepting or the family not being accepting?
I think it was, half and half.
Yeah.
I but what was consistent in the stories was the sadness and then the joy, depending on where your story was leading, but the support
Hmm.
that was given, and comes back to my belief as a social worker for many years that the best information and referral usually comes from people who are in the trenches. You can look at all the resources you want, and now we got Dr. Google and all that, but it's usually when people are connecting within a community where the best information, referral, comfort, soothing, uh, relief really comes from. And that can't. It's not always 100% true because people connect on different levels, but it's been my experience throughout my career that people are not going to give a bad referral to a friend or a colleague who's been dealing with something similar.
Yeah.
It's just not. I mean, to me that would just I just doesn't compensate. I can't imagine somebody doing that.
One of the things I've been digging into recently, because I've had friends who are grieving the loss of people very close to them. And it's the same thing where we want instant relief for whatever ails us. If we're feeling lonely because we're feeling isolated, we want instant relief for that. If we are sad, and in depression because we are grieving the loss of someone, we want instant relief for that. But the reality is, the best therapy is that slower process of making connections with people, with real people. And that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's I don't mean to put it in simplistic terms, but it's kind of like healthy human relationships. I mean, I don't know. I think life's more complicated for kids today. Mm, Maybe that I remember, you know, as a kid going to the ballpark, being able to play outside, do it, just not deal with so many emotional issues.
Yeah. I was thinking about that this morning. I really do think, and we've talked about this before, I think that the world is currently engaged in this trauma response to our last, I want to say, almost decade, where thing after global thing has happened. I feel like all of us, this entire planet, just needs to be sat on a therapist couch, with our eyes closed, with our hands folded on our chest, and to have someone with a nice, soothing voice says, "Okay, tell me what you're going through, and let's address it." And I think that's what the world needs. You're right. Things are a lot more. I mean, I dare say that, after major global events like, oh, I don't know, world wars, that they were dealing with the same thing, and I don't know that they approached it any better. But absolutely, and that again, that is why we're doing this. This is one giant therapy session for us and whoever's listening.
I just think it's so important for people to be able to share their experiences as whether growing up, as they age, uh, modeling what works for them, and uh, understanding that you're not alone. And that's what I go back to the gay grandparent group. Um, what I've always taken from that experience is that in all the joys and the trauma that they experienced as parents and spouses, they were able to find a safe space with like-minded people that understood where they were what they were experiencing. And I think that's over and above any type of therapy session or however you want to say it. You just want to know that you're within a community that at least understands where you've been and where you're going. And I think that's kind of what's missing in our society right now. Where nobody, it's everything's being thrown at us lickety split, all these one liners and posts. And it's like, uh, can we just kind of sit back and be a community?
I do want to put a bow on the top of this topic of Grandparents' Day, and I do want to acknowledge something that you said at the very beginning of this, and that is, beyond just grandparents, there are probably loads and loads of grand aunts and grand uncles, and being
Hmm.
able to, especially in large families, being able to have that experience as well, which is something that you have.
Well, and that's precisely correct, Josh, because there are tons of aunts and uncles, great aunts and uncles
Mm.
that are out there that are play prominent roles. It's funny that my nieces and nephews call me they call me the FU, the favorite uncle. But they also have recognized as their parents have gotten older, as I have gotten older, that there's always going to be a connection to the family, to that family of origin, as they as they choose, and I see that as my role, especially because I'm 10 years or more younger
Mhm.
than my siblings. I mean, there's nobody ever, you don't really know, but there's a pretty good chance I'm going to outlive my siblings, and I'll be the connector to their family. And I mean, I feel like I'm up for the task, but not that I'm planning on it, but it is in the back of your mind. That's why, again, it was so fun to start out with having this conversation. Oh, I'm a great great uncle today. I'm a F U U. I got to F
No, no,
U
no, it'd be GGFU.
G G G G G F U.
Do we have to
Um,
add that to your to the list of abbreviate LGBTQ I plus
plus, if you
GGFU?
oh, that'll stir some controversy for sure. What
Oh,
the,
well.
it's like,
What
what's
can I
all that
do?
about? So,
Well, happy Grandparents' Day to all of our folks out there listening, and just know that when it comes to loving and learning and leaving a legacy, you can be a grandparent, you can be a great grandparent, you can be a GGFU, or you can just be a mentor to someone who is in your chosen family.
mm-hmm,
Because there are plenty of folks like me. I don't have any, like my kids have no grandparents left on my side, but I'm certainly surrounded by plenty of mentors. There's plenty of folks who would be of that generation who
right.
add value. So
Add
chosen
value.
family is very important to us as well. We
Right.
just want to wish you the best day today. Well, really, all the days be great, but we celebrate you today.
Happy Grandparents' Day.
So, Chris, how can people get a hold of us?
Well, they can email us at yesiam at aginggayfully.com. That's yes, I am at aginggayfully.com. Visit us
Exceptional.
online at aginggayfully.com. Eventually, I'll get to doing the website, but I in my advanced years,
Whatever.
I'm having more fun doing this than working on technology. So,
I want to encourage all of you folks out there listening that if you at all like what we do, please send this to your friends who you think would get something out of this. We don't go really hard on social media because number one, it's exhausting, and number two, I feel like the most effective way for us to get our message out there, as you alluded to earlier, Chris, is recommendations. So just send us to your friends. We'll jump in a little box. You just tell us where to be delivered, and we will go there. Send us to
and
your
send us
friends,
your stories. Send us your aging gayfully stories. Send us your grandparents' stories. We want to
and we
hear.
will definitely read them.
Yeah. And when are we? When Josh? When are we doing live? And when are we doing video? That's coming up next, folks.
That is coming up next, and I bought a new light so that we can see all the things. So I'm ready whenever. I have a camera. We're looking at each other right now. We can do that whenever you want. We're
Okay.
good to go.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. So until next week, we will be wishing and hoping for you the best.